Good morning, everyone. Want to invite you to the reading of James chapter 3, the passage of James, not the one that we just read in our liturgy here. It's actually the passage that was from last week's section, chapter 3, verses 13 through 17. Sorry, I said chapter 3. Have I got it? Oh, yes. I was almost going to read chapter 4. Chapter 3, verse 13 through 18. Who is wise and understanding among you? Show by your good life that your works are done with gentleness, born of wisdom. But if you have bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not be boastful and false to the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, devilish. For where there's envy and selfish ambition, there will also be disorder and wickedness of every kind. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without a trace of partiality or hypocrisy. And a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace for those who makes peace. We have elections next week here in Brazil for the city government. I don't know how much you are in touch with the candidates in election. Even if you're not too interested in that, you probably sometime hear some candidate publicizing his proposals. I don't know what you think about this, but of course, they try to make it or try to convince you that they will bring solutions to the different problems in the city. And sometimes they make it sound so simple. They can do it. I mean, government is there, hasn't been able to solve it, but I'll do it. Vote on me and I'll solve this problem. Makes it sound not only simple, but simplistic. Too simplistic. Sometimes I even think that some of these scans don't have the least idea what all involves, how complex some issues are. They try to make it simple. I think there's a difference between being simple and simplistic. Actually, some recommend that if you have a very complex situation that you have to solve, you have some issue that is too complex and difficult to solve, you start with the simple steps. You start with the small steps, and you come up to the solution. But it's true, sometimes it makes it sound too simplistic. Well, we have a passage here that it's called Two Kinds of Wisdom. Sometimes when we read this idea, the wisdom, and we have a lot of wisdom in the Old Testament. For example, Psalm 1 is typically a wisdom psalm. It compares two ways. Compares the way of the righteousness and the way of the wicked. It says that the way of the righteous will lead to success. The way of the wicked will lead to disaster. So wisdom, in a sense, it portrays a very simple life. Two choices you have, two ways. Your life will depend on the choices that you take. As we read wisdom, we sometimes think it's too simplistic. Well, James is reflecting some of this wisdom tradition, or this wisdom way of thinking in the Old Testament. We know the letter of James is it's a very Jewish letter in the sense that it was written to Christians that were mainly from a Jewish background, probably Jerusalem. James was one of the leaders in the Jerusalem church. Probably this was before the church had emancipated to the Gentile world, and we see a lot of this Jewish language here. And James tends to be very practical. He gives very several guidelines on how to live out your faith. And some of the issues that we see here is has to do with temptation, sin, controlling your tongue, showing your faith in practical terms. And here in particular, he is contrasting these two ways of thinking and two ways of acting. He refers to earthly wisdom and to a wisdom from above. And what are these? What are they? And why is it so important to understand them? Is what we want to talk real quickly here. But as I said, it's a simple way of dealing with a complex situation. He puts it in a simple way. He puts in a way, in a sense, contrasting two ways of thinking. If we try to understand what is wisdom, what is he referring to? Well, let's say it's a two contrasting mindsets, two ways of looking at things. For example, the book of Proverbs in the Old Testament is a very important book of wisdom, and it refers to how you approach life in many ways. In Proverbs, it says that the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. So, fear of the Lord leads us to approach life in a different perspective. The perspective of God, a perspective of not only the belief in God, but also in respecting God and fearing God. So, in a sense, it's two way of looking at life's problems, life's issues, and so forth. And here James is picking up on this and saying there are two ways that you can approach life. Actually, at the beginning of the chapter, he was talking about the tongue and how it's very hard to control our tongue, and how from our tongue comes nice words, good words, but also comes words that hurt, words that offend. And we have to be able to control our tongues. And he says, well, actually, our tongue is one of the hardest things to control. So he starts saying that who is wise and understanding among you? Show by your good life that your works are done with gentleness, born of wisdom. But if you have bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts. Do not be boastful and false to the truth. Verse 15, such wisdom does not come down from above. So, this is one way of looking at things. Earthly wisdom. Wisdom that does not come from above. I'll say that he briefly describes each one of these wisdom, and there's an important command referring to this wisdom. So, this wisdom, earthly wisdom, does not come from above. How does he describe it? It's earthly, it's unspiritual, it's devilish. And then he refers, for where there's envy and selfish ambition, there will also be disorder and wickedness of every kind. Apparently, then, this is wisdom. This wisdom causes a lot of problem. So, what he's basically saying is that actually, behind all selfishness or all selfish ambition, behind disorder, behind the wickedness of every kind, there is a way of thinking that is not from above. If you have bitter envy, selfish ambition in your hearts, do not be boastful, because this is earthly, unspiritual, and devilish. Interesting, he's not actually comparing two moral ways of living. Uh, when we hear about wisdom, it may deal sometimes with moral issues, but it seems like the moral issue is not the main thing, because is actually saying our morality comes as a result of wisdom, of our mindset, of our fearing God or not fearing God. If we commit wrong things, is because in our mind we have a selfish ambition or we have wickedness. Jesus says something similar when he says that the commandment says, you shall not kill. Well, but actually, if you hate somebody, you're already killing. And Jesus is saying, well, you see, all this hate that leads to someone killing the other is born inside, is in our heart, is in our mind. So, in a similar way, James is saying that if there are any envy, selfishness in our heart, this is because there's a wisdom that doesn't come from above. Well, earthly means, let's put it in different words here. It's secular, unspiritual. Let's put in the words. It's materialistic. It has to do with the material, and devilish. It causes division because there's envy and selfishness. When we see a lot of things that are in not only social media but in the news many times, or things that we see in the secular world, we can relate to some of the words that James is saying. A lot of the wisdom, the secular wisdom, very selfish, very materialistic, very ambitious to oneself. So we are constantly being fed by this sort of wisdom, this uh, materialistic, this secular wisdom, devilish wisdom, that is a wisdom that is more than just a way of thinking, is teaching us how to live our lives. We're exposed to a lot of this way of thinking. And it's interesting how this way of thinking is so popular. You can see the YouTube channels. What are the most popular YouTube channels? Usually are the channels that um, portray a lot of this wisdom that doesn't come from above. In general, this is the description of this wisdom. And there's a command about this wisdom. And the command we can see in verse 14. So if you have a bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not be boastful and do not be false to the truth. This is probably one of the greatest things that we needed to hear today in time of social media. Because if there's one thing that we can see a lot is people are very proud of uh, their distorted ideas or their wisdom, their supposed wisdom or their earthly wisdom, their materialistic wisdom. You see a lot of people boasting and a lot of people being false to the truth. And this is being propagated in a very powerful manner. This is the wisdom that is not from above. But there's another wisdom. Also, we see a quick description of this wisdom, and we see also a command about this wisdom. So, verse 17 says, but the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without a trace of partiality and hypocrisy. This goes counter culture. It does not go with our culture. You don't see many YouTube channels being so popular where it reaffirms this sort of wisdom. Wisdom that will produce things that are pure, that are peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, and with no partiality and hypocrisy. Well, we can say, yeah, there's a lot of people publicizing, Christian ideas, Christian teaching, scripture teaching, and anyway, and we can see there's a lot of wisdom being communicated even through our modern ways of, our channels of communication and so on. But sometimes, even then, we can see uh, maybe partiality. Maybe we can see some hypocrisy in a lot of this, and we say, "Well, is this reflecting truly the wisdom from above?" Verse 16 says, "And a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace for those who make peace." We can basically see the results of this wisdom. The result is essentially peace and righteousness. And it describes again, a mindset, a way of thinking. And this reflects a lot of what Jesus had taught also in the Sermon on the Mountain. The way that we should uh, live our lives. Interestingly, again, he's not referring to things that are strictly moral, but things that somehow form our way of thinking, our way of life. Has to do with qualities of our personality, qualities of our heart or our mind. It has to do with how we approach life and how we relate to one another, how we relate to God, and how we can live our lives. Pure, peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits. What James is saying that we need to demonstrate this sort of wisdom. And here's the command. We see this command in verse 13. So, if there's wisdom and understanding, show. This is the command, the imperative here. Show by your good life that your works are done with gentleness born of wisdom. Can you see? Show what is born of wisdom. Wisdom is the mindset, is the way of seeing things, is the way of understanding our lives, God, the world, and so on. So wisdom is the, let's say, the source of thinking through which we will be acting. Our actions reflect what is in our heart. Our actions reflect what we think about other people and what we think about ourselves and what we think about God. So what James is telling is that we need to show our wisdom through, your good life and your works. So all our exterior actions, our deeds reflect what we are and how we think inside. So, in a negative way, it says, do not boast about this wisdom that doesn't come from above. On the other side, in a positive way, it says, show, manifest your wisdom. We tend to complain, or we tend to think that there's no hope for certain things in our society or with people in general, and we are many times intimidated by power, by corruption, immorality, and so forth. But in a sense, this passage invites us to show our wisdom. So, in other words, to manifest also the good wisdom that comes from above. Why? Why is this so important? We can roughly say that there's a natural and spontaneous, not intentional way of living, and there's one that demands effort, that goes against the grain. Problem is that secularly and even in a religious perspective, we are told constantly to be yourself, be oneself. It's important to just be yourself, as to compared to it's almost compared to being selfish. It's very modern way of thinking that people want to just be able to be oneself, and they just want to seek their own objectives and dreams and so forth. this there's a lot of good things about this, at least in our modern lives. It's important for people to be oneself. But in our Christian perspective, this needs to be put into the perspective of the wisdom that comes from above, or in the perspective of our faith in Jesus Christ. What is it to be oneself in Jesus' perspective, or in the perspective of this wisdom that comes from above? It it naturally has to do, obviously has to do with being pure, being peaceable, being gentle, being willing to yield, being full of mercy and good fruits, and without partiality and hypocrisy. So it's very important for us to hear and hear it again, the words of James about this wisdom. As it even as it may sound very simplistic, and for sure, our problems and our um, issues here are not so simple. They're very complex. But the wisdom that comes from above, or the wisdom teaching in the Bible, not only here in James, helps us start in a simple way. Helps us start giving simple steps. And the simple step that James is helping us take here is to be aware of where our actions come from. What is the wisdom that is in our heart? Is the wisdom that is from above, or is the wisdom that is earthly, materialistic? One leads us to selfishness, and the other leads us to good fruits and leads us to be peaceable and gentle with one another. There are a lot of challenges in our lives, a lot of challenges in our society. We can take small steps in understanding what is the wisdom that we are seeking to follow. May the Lord bless us. Amen.